Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McLean.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed your host, Jim McLean, Editor-in-Chief of the Banterflix Movie Review website. Welcome to the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Movies. If this is your first time checking out the pod, then you might be wondering what it's all about. Well, the clue's in the title. It's pretty straightforward. We need to talk about movies. Each week we talk about a specific film. It might be a new release, it might be a cult classic, it might be a film you've never heard of before. I gather together some contributors and we have a chat about the film. Sometimes we do get a little bit spoilerific. We try our best to warn you if that's the case. But we try to have a bit of fun in the process and hopefully you enjoy listening to it. If it's your first time checking out the pod, welcome to the madness. If you've been listening for a while, then thank you for continuing to tune in. This week, we are talking about the Duce Tapes. It's available on VOD services to rent or buy now. I'm going to be joined later on by local writer Victoria Brown, known to regular listeners as Banterflix's resident Disney Queen. But before you hear Victoria and I sharing our thoughts on the film, you'll also hear my interview with the Duce Tapes producer, Tim Kirk. I'll say this right from the get-go, listeners. We will be dealing with some sensitive subject matter throughout this podcast, primarily the issue of rape. It will quickly become apparent to y'all that the El Duce was not a nice guy. He's someone who championed rape rock, and we're going to be discussing that throughout the pod. And if any of you might find this too much of a trigger, then I'd maybe suggest giving this podcast a miss. But I can assure you we try our best to talk about the subject matter as sensitively as possible, as we possibly can. But I just wanted to make that apparent to you all right from the offset. And with that, we will move on and get stuck into this week's pod. First up, you'll hear my chat with Tim. And before we get into that interview, let's play a clip of the El Duce Tapes.
Whatever it takes for entertainment.
How do you describe Mentor's music? What is it to you?
Male chauvinism rock.
What songs do you think are his best songs?
I guess maybe Free Fix for a Fuck is a big favorite of mine. I think to a certain extent he's like a great artist in that he doesn't really give a damn what people think of him.
I've got my lyrics, and if they don't like it, they could eat shit out of my ass.
And he was like running around the bus going into people's face with this pee balloon.
It's as easy as that.
I mean, he's successful because he gets reaction. It's like there's a need for that in society.
El Duce had a lot of weird aspects to his personality.
What's that like, not having a home?
Makes me want to drink more. I think I'd make the first greatest dictator that this country has ever had. I'm American all the way.
So that's a clip of the El Duce Tapes, and I'm joined now by Tim Kirk, the film's producer. Tim, I'm going to let you explain to our viewers and explain to our listeners what is the El Duce Tapes all about.
All right.
Let's see, how long have we got? How long have we got? Because there's a lot to unpack within this documentary.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I guess I could start with the history of the film. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes way back, but like 25 years ago, maybe more. I was this 22-year-old kid kicking around Hollywood, and I had a friend who was an actor, and one night we found El Duce and decided to take my friend's huge VHS camcorder down to a place where they were recording their new album in this dive in Hollywood that was just, it was Gomorrah, and and we filmed, and initially it was kind of a jokey project, like Ryan was on camera, and he was playing this kind of Dick Clark character who was like very, very glib with Elle, who was drunk and offensive, and he would say "oh my" and things like that. And anyway, we sort of struck up a friendship with these guys. We started filming them. I got kind of bored of the project, but Ryan filmed for 2 years, just hung out with these guys. I would pop in and help with the interviews now and then, but then I lost track of him, and so, a million years later, I got back in touch, and we got a hold of the tapes. He'd shot over 40 hours of footage, and I got David Lawrence involved, and I got Rodney Asher involved, and we finally made a film out of it.
You talked there, I mean, like, right from the get-go, we see that the aforementioned El Duce is an offensive character. There's no way of getting away from that. I mean, you kind of can't look away. And I first became aware of this documentary last year at the London Film Festival in 2019. I didn't get a chance to see it then, but I know from kind of talking with fellow critics at the time, as you do, back in the day, it feels like a lifetime ago now, when you went to a festival, at the end of the day, when you watched the press releases and you went to screenings, you descended to the pub and had a chat about what you'd watched. And I know quite a few of my fellow critics had saw this and had said, look, it's like a train wreck in the best possible way. You can't look away because you just kind of go, is this guy for real? And just, I want to pick up something that you said, like back the time you were involved with the original footage for this, you kind of said you kind of got bored of this. Was there any particular reason that? Was it the characters themselves? Because I mean, you talked there that you developed a bit of a friendship. These guys, I'm just coming from me. They would be difficult people to say that I would probably, would I or would I not want them to be in my circle of friends? I don't know. But just on that note, I mean, do you recollect and thinking about it back, and you remember kind of why you kind of moved away after you kind of got a little bit bored of the project at the time?
Well, I think yes, and I think you laser focus on two words I used, which was bored and friendship, and I think I overstated both of those.
Okay,
I was less bored, as in. Well, let's do the second one first. The friendship, I definitely overstated. I think Ryan actually became friends with them. I became, I guess, a little more comfortable being in their presence. But I didn't get bored as much as I just kind of, the relentless need to offend that was El Duce. Is exhausting in an hour and a half film, but it is exhausting in the same room, or following him around to a club, or trying to navigate getting him through a door that he's been banned from going through. It was just wearing, I would say, more than that. Now, I sound like I'm not selling the film very well, because the guy is fascinating.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. As I say, it is like the only example I can really use, Tim, is like it's a car crash. You cannot look away. I've watched this now. It's available to rent or buy now, and I've watched it. I've watched it twice because I just kind of find it compelling in a voyeuristic isn't probably the right kind of way to kind of describe it, but I just find myself kind of going, I want to go back. Did he say that? Are those lyrics in that song? And then particularly near the end of the documentary, as there's kind of parallels kind of with society now being drawn, you kind of go, yeah, you want to go back and connect the dots. It is a riveting watch. I have to say, it's probably not the right way to term, but you cannot look away. So please do not think you're underselling the project in any way.
Okay, good. Don't want to do that. Well, that's great to hear, because we've had our nose in this thing for, 3 years or more. And So it's really great to hear that it's not, that it's still, you can still watch it twice and it's still fresh. That's really,
Yeah,
as I
I
happy.
say, it's not probably the best way to sell that idea of a car crash, that you just kind of, what will he say next? And I had kind of, when watching it the first time, I kind of, why am I, or where have I seen this character before? Where have I seen this guy before? And it wasn't Jerry Springer, but it was the Nick Broomfield documentary, and that's mentioned within this. That was where it suddenly kind of, yeah, I'm not a Mentors fan. I never was. That's not my type of music. But I couldn't remember where I couldn't place him where I knew him from, or where I'd seen that character from. And it was then when you go back and you kind of in this documentary, you mentioned that he appears kind of 8 days before his death. He appears on the Nick Broomfield documentary. And it's like, that's when the dots were connected for me. Coming back specifically to this feature, this is something you've clearly, it's been there and been in development for a while. What's the process for you of producing a project like this? What are the central challenges, and then what are the kind of hurdles you find yourself getting across during that process?
Well, the initial challenge was, we had so much footage, and we really needed to kind of like figure out what the movie was. And I watched all those 40 hours, pretty closely, and I logged things that I thought were interesting, and themes that might run through the whole thing. But I have to give a lot of credit to David Lawrence, who was the first director to come on, and then worked together with Rodney when he came on, realizing there could be a feature in here, because I have to say, after those 40 hours, I was feeling a little worn down, again, from El's sort of shtick, and figuring, well, maybe we should make this as short as possible. But he actually found, the compelling themes that made it really work. So that was one of the challenges. Second of all, this is self-financed. So, fortunately, we have goodwill with some incredibly talented people that we've worked with in the past, like Jonathan Snipes, who did the sound mix and also the music, and some good friends over at Anarchy Post who helped us, incredible job with the color correction. This is all VHS tapes.
That was one thing I did want to ask you about. Sorry to cut across, because that was one thing.
No, please.
The challenge of working with this old VHS footage, and bringing it. Now we're in the world of 4K DCP. Having had a camcorder back in my youth, and looking back at that footage, it is not 4K. It is not 4K you're dealing with, but kind of the challenge of bringing that, I suppose, analog content to the digital era. I suppose that I kind of cut across you when you were saying that, but the challenge of bringing that footage to and having to be able to work with it.
Yeah, well, I think the answer is we just had to embrace it, and glitches and all, and we really got into the aesthetic of that. Those crazy lines that form across the screen when you're probably taping over something else, like a Seinfeld episode that was originally on the tape or something, and so we just really embraced that. And then the guys in post, we actually kind of accentuated the VHS-ness, if that's a word, of the imagery, rather than trying to pretend we could actually smooth it over, which we couldn't. And that fits with not only the time, it's a real time capsule, but also I think with sort of the roughness and unformedness of our subject matter.
Yeah. What was that challenge like with work for you from producing point of view, working with the dual directors kind of on that project? You mentioned David Lawrence there, and you have Rodney Asher, if I'm getting that right, working with those two. What was that like on a project like this, having two directors at the helm?
Well, it was, I don't know, I don't want to sound like they're children, but you're gonna make them sound like children, so it's okay. Yeah. No, but I can relate it. I'm a father, and I can relate it to when my daughter was younger, when we'd get together for a play date or something, and I would sort of need to be there and, no, that's his shovel or whatever, It wasn't like they were at each other's throats, but they were working out their creative relationship. And there was a really wonderful moment when I realized I could miss an editing session, or perhaps it would even be better if I missed an editing session, because these guys were really grooving and they had their own language. And that's, I think, when things just really took off.
Yeah. Also, just coming back on what you said earlier on about being there with the film, what's your memories of taking the cameras into? Because I think, is it a couple of gigs as well? Were you in at that stage? You know, what's your memories of taking that? And I'm curious to know what a crowd for like the Mentors would have been like, and how they would have reacted to having, like, to an extent, you know, a camera crew. And even I suppose today, like, thinking that cameras are not as kind of easily brought around as they are now. You know, they're not as well now, but you know, now we can go to a concert and shoot, you know, on one of these. That's clearly not what you're shooting with then. Your memories of that and being involved at that time?
Yeah, I shot Ryan shot most of that. I shot one. And it was a really, well, you know, first of all, El Duce was incredibly psyched to have a camera in the room, right? And so the bigger the better for him. You know, it made him feel like, hey, we're on camera here, you know. And but yeah, it was physically difficult because these guys are moving around and this thing is big and it's heavy, right? But the other funny part about it is, you know, these guys had very, very ill will for most of the places that would book them. Were not like, oh, fantastic, anything you want, you know, if you're with the Mentor. So it was a lot of work just to get in the door, you know.
I'm gonna imagine you didn't take that camera into the mosh pit. I'm gonna no, that's not going anywhere near that. You know what? I know you said you stepped away at the time, and you kind of find that being around them an exhausting process. But what we see on camera, you know, was that what we see? What's that? What you saw off camera when the cameras aren't there, or was there a sense, I suppose, of playing up to the camera, or even amongst those 40 hours of footage that you mentioned? From what we get is condensed down to an hour and 44-minute documentary. You know, what? There's no denying that is the El Duce that, you know, we've come to know. But when the cameras aren't there, you know, is the El Duce, you know, there's El Duce, and I suppose we have the name, the gentleman's name has went out of my head completely. You know, is he as much as what we see on camera as when the cameras aren't rolling?
Yeah, well, so there was no moment where it was cut and then he was like, oh, can we do that again, please? You know, he was very, if anything, what we were cutting out was the 75% of the stuff that didn't work, that his joke, you know, because he was just on all the time. And, you know, his humor is not nuanced, you know. So when it didn't work, it was just, you know, it was like, you know, single entendres and just sort of like the obvious thing that you would get angry about or say to be obscene. So, you know, I was reminded of that going through the tapes of like how much of this was just eye rolling, just him trying to get the bit, to get his internal shtick going, you know. But he was never, the moments you see where he sort of dropped his persona and so forth that are in the film, those were the only ones we had. You know, it wasn't like that was from a mass amount of footage like that.
Yeah, and what's your view now, looking at it now in 2020? I suppose looking back at that time, that stage in the 90s, and kind of the media attention that bands like the Mentors got, and how, you know, we look at that, you know, controversy, it does, you know, they state that, if I'm remembering this correctly in the documentary, the more controversial they were, the more media attention they got. It benefited their record sales, and then that helps fuel the beast. And there's a lot of parallels we could draw with other events, where we've seen that, where the media has reacted in something and basically looked at something, and then they've become. I'm trying to avoid mentioning Donald Trump here as best I can.
Yeah,
but you see that parallel from there. The fact that the more controversial, and there's no denying some of the lyrics that they are repulsive, they're shocking, but they're deliberately meant to be. And just looking at, because I suppose in a small way, even bringing the cameras in plays a small part in that as well, of you're filming something because you have been shocked by something, you have been shocked and outraged, and you want to document it. Looking now back in that at 2020, what's your kind of general views on that kind of idea?
Well, I kind of feel that El Duce is sort of a man before his time, because I don't think he got the longevity of his shtick could have lasted a lot longer in a world like now, where there would have been so many more venues. He did Springer and like one other thing, and that was actually sort of late in his career. The thing that first caught him into the public eye, and the thing that caught my eye, was when his lyrics were read as part of a congressional investigation into bad lyrics and how they deal with that. And to me, when I was 20 or whatever, and that happened, I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard in the world. That these ridiculous lyrics meant to offend were being elevated to this incredible, like playing in this room, of the hollowed sanctions of the U.S. government. But looking back on it, I mean, that was just the first step for him, and I don't think it's a good or bad thing, but I think he would have done I think his bit would have gone a lot further if he was doing it right now. I don't know if he'd gotten to the presidency, but maybe close.
We'll never know. Let's just wonder. Let's just say we're glad that El Duce did not do social media. That's all we can probably agree on at that point. You mentioned, that this is a low-budget documentary. What's been its journey on the festival circuit? It has been successful. As I mentioned, it played the London Film Festival. It was an official selection, official competition, if I remember right. I think... if I'm recall, I think it played the Dublin Film Festival as well, possibly. Well, I think it played Dublin.
Hot Dogs.
Yeah.
We played Hot Dogs in Toronto, a couple other places.
We mentioned, the fact that 2020, we try our best to not talk about COVID, but it's changed a lot of things, and it's changed the lay of the land, a lot of things. What's your kind of thoughts at the minute? Because I mentioned there, festivals, it's about networking, it's all about that type of stuff. Your kind of thoughts? We've seen a lot of festivals move online. I know the film's here available, as I said at the start of this interview. You can pick it up in video on demand services now. You can rent or buy it. But just your thoughts as someone who is producing documentaries. You've had success in the past with the stuff like Room 237, which I adore. I absolutely adore that.
Thank you.
But your general thoughts on kind of the changing shifts and as we go into 2021, what the lasting legacy, because we've seen, was it yesterday, or we've seen fairly recently that a lot of releases now, particularly in America, are going to be going to Warner Brothers Max, the simultaneous release. That's big budget productions. But what about the likes of work that you're working on?
Yeah, well, personally, as a filmmaker, the biggest jolt I get is watching a film with an audience. And so that's really hard, that's not really going to be much of an option in the near future, at least. On the other hand, and also I miss what you're talking about, the sort of the conversations afterwards that come from a live event. I mean, I guess there are more and more opportunities with streaming and so forth. If we're moving in that direction, the more people can see it, which is nice. But I really, I miss. I'm really enjoying this because we're having a one-on-one conversation about the film, and that's about as close as I'm getting right now to getting that sort of that rush of watching a film with an audience and watching them go up and down and gasp, and a couple people have walked out. It's really an exhilarating process, and I'm really going to miss it.
Yeah, because I suppose the way I've thought about this in the past, a lot of films now do find their audience now on streaming services, but a festival circuit has always helped kind of maybe elevate that ever so slightly to help build notoriety above, because the streaming service, it is a huge it's a democratizing platform. It gives you access to a lot of viewers at the touch of a button, but also there's a hell of a lot of other content out there then that is suddenly all in that same platform. So I suppose there's that sense that the festival circuit in the past, because I know when we go to festivals like London, there's films that seemingly disappear and then suddenly they arrive on Netflix, on Prime. I'm not sure, I know there's a lot of other streaming services out in the States that are kind of just state specific, but is that something as well? You just generally your thoughts on that, on how a festival circuit, the traditional festival circuit, watching stuff with an audience, as we've kind of said, all the things that we love because we are passionate about cinema, that, it's going to be a big potential void if it's just for a little while anyway, of festivals going mostly online.
Yeah, I think a really good example of that in my world is with Room 237, which played at Sundance, and it had something that I think a lot of films that play a festival that have their initial release on the festival, is there's a feeling that you're never going to see it again. Like, that's it. This is the moment, and you feel really so lucky and a little blessed that you're going to get to see this thing that's going to disappear. And everyone wants to talk about it and write about it, and it's ephemeral. And then when it does break through, then that energy continues with it, And I think there's so many films that we could think of that enjoyed that kind of debut, and so I think that's tough. And then also there's the sense of community that we keep coming back to in this conversation is very powerful. With people. It's like trading baseball cards or something. It's like, holy shit, look at this thing I found, and you should see it. And that's a really powerful influence as well. So that when it does end up on the streaming or other platform, there's already that sort of built-in feeling to the viewing.
Yeah, but look, let's not be doom and gloom. Like, what are the projects what projects are you working on right now? How has I suppose I'm saying let's move on because we were talking then about COVID. Like, how has that affected you? I mean, from a producing point of view, what have you been able to have? What have you been able to work with, or what have you been working on over the past several months, and what going forward will be the next projects that we'll hopefully be talking about in the future?
All right. Well, first we had something in Ronnie and I had been talking about this project for a long time. And it started off as called the branding of that, and now it's called The Glitch in the Matrix. And it's something that we've been working along. And fortunately, it was in a far enough post-production that we were able to continue to get it done. It got into some festivals, it got canceled, it's been rescheduled, but it will be coming out soon. So that one we kind of squeaked through. And then I've got a couple other projects that I'm near completion, but it's very difficult to get interviews right now that it's, that you feel safe. I shot a interview the other day with a 90-year-old man just because he's got some health issues, and I didn't want him to disappear before we finished the film. But it's masks and all that, and it's very difficult. But okay, but I get real quick. I've got a thing coming out which will be just an odd view on the television show Miami Vice. A very personal view from a subject. And I have a thing on a forgotten Western star named Charles Starrett, who made over 150 films in the 30s and 40s, but no one remembers him. And a couple other things in the works, but that's where I'm at right now.
Okay, those are intriguing projects. You've definitely kind of caught my interest with that. You know, just because you mentioned they're talking about interviews, like I know we're talking now over Zoom. You know, that's obviously not how you'd want to do interviews for a film, because unfortunately, I mean, it's grand for us and kind of what we're doing right now, but it's not quality content, you know. So I suppose there's a lot of challenges there right now in trying to set up those interviews and kind of working with them.
Yeah, it's difficult. With this glitch in the matrix, like a lot like with the VHS and El Duce, we're able to work sort of the Skype format into the sort of the texture of the film, but I'm just not into that. Especially the films. These are all films I started before COVID, and they just don't feel like, if I tried to put a Zoom interview in there, it just wouldn't fit. I'm sure there are films that would work, and neither of these would that work. It just wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I know, because I've spoke to a few filmmakers. We run a horror festival here in Belfast. We've just set one up, and unfortunately our inaugural year had to go completely digital, and we did a lot of interviews like this, and a few of those interviews, they do documentaries, and we're kind of talking about the project and say, look, it's great for this, but for the quality that we want to be able to do, you know, doing an interview via Zoom, it's just not the same. And we've recently started our own TV show back here in Belfast, and I've forgotten how much I missed physical contact and being able to sit in a room, because it's very different kind of, okay, yes, we can talk and I can kind of listen to what you're saying and pick up what you're saying, but I think it's a very different thing from when you're sitting with someone 2 meters at least, well, now anyway, 2 meters apart from you, and be able to read their body language and be able to talk. So yeah, you know, these are all complications. But anyway, you're not here to talk to me about interviewing and things like that, but I'm very interested in those projects that you're working on. The El Duce Tapes, as we've said at the start of the interview, is available now here in the UK through various VOD services, and I would highly recommend checking it out. So, Tim Kirk, thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it was really good speaking to you, and best of luck with the rest of all those things you're talking about. Sounds fantastic.
So that's my interview with Tim Kirk, the producer of the El Duce Tapes, and I'm joined now. This seems like a strange time to bring this up, but Banterflix's resident Disney queen. Strange that we find her talking about the El Duce Tapes. And as I said in my introduction to this week's podcast, we're going to be talking and dealing with some sensitive issues that might be some triggers for some people. And we will try our best to talk about those as sensitively and as sensitively, really, is the only way to put it, as we can, with some of the discussions, some of the issues raised within this documentary. I know we're usually quite lighthearted here at Banterflix. I get a sense we still will be with this documentary, but there's no denying it has some pretty serious and pretty dark places it goes to with its the El Duce and some of the things he comes out with. Victoria, we've talked to Tim about the documentary, so we don't need to spend too much time setting it up, other than the fact that this is a documentary that uses footage that was found. Over 40 hours of it was condensed into just an hour and 40 minutes worth of a documentary that deals with the El Duce, who was a member of the band The Mentors, that kind of came to notoriety in the late 80s, early 90s. And he's not a great guy, Victoria. I mean, that's as kind of flippant.
A nice way to put it.
That's as flippant as I can be in this. But yeah, I find this, as I said in the interview with Tim, I find this very hard to watch, but I couldn't look away, in that sense, like a train wreck that you wanted to see how far this guy goes. I couldn't, and I said this in the documentary, I couldn't remember where I knew him from or where I knew the face or the character from. And they mentioned in the documentary, the other documentary, that he shows up with Kurt and Courtney. And I remember watching that at the time and finding him thoroughly offensive then. And a whole documentary about the guy is he's a pretty offensive character. And I remember at the time when I thought of people that would make and I have an interesting conversation with about the documentary, I thought of yourself, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So what did you think about the El Duce tapes?
I had no idea what to expect. Like, I wouldn't watch music documentaries that much. The only one that I would be familiar with would be the Malaise Brothers one about the Rolling Stones concert in the 70s, where a member of the audience was stabbed and it was caught on camera. It's called Gimme Shelter. If you want to watch it, it's very, very good. I knew nothing about the mentors. I didn't know who El Duce was, so I went in completely blind, and it was a really, really tough watch.
Yeah, as I say, I didn't know anything about them either. I couldn't figure out where I knew this guy from, and it's only in the later stages of the documentary when it touches on the fact that I think it's 8 days before he died, he was interviewed for this documentary on Kurt and Courtney, and so this is not a nice guy, and as I say, you know, the El Duce, he's someone who kind of proclaimed to be the creator of rape rock, and let's not say, I'm not going to be going on iTunes and finding any of his back catalogue. I don't really want to talk about any of the lyrics that are there. They are pretty offensive. They are pretty nasty. I think what I find, and I touched on this in the documentary, in this idea of someone who was pretty a marginal part of that kind of metal scene, and it's only when he became got front and center and stuff like Jerry Springer, when he became sensationalist TV, that he really kind of not became, you know, a superstar by any means, but he definitely, you know, there was a sense that the media fueled the fire and the interest in this. And I mean, I drew the comparison with Tim when we were talking about this, a certain, you know, outgoing president, kind of very similar kind of attitude, kind of similar approach by the media. Someone that, oh, this is what he says, let's look at what he says, we'll hang on every word that he says, and suddenly he becomes mainstream, he becomes center of attention. Do you feel like, from watching, although you don't know, or you didn't know about the mentors and you didn't know about the El Duce, do you still see, looking at now, do you see a legacy of what he stood for being still present in, I suppose, kind of, I don't want to say mainstream culture, but can you see a legacy from the El Duce?
See, it's a hard question, because like there are still people like him about. I don't know if they've been directly influenced by how much like media coverage he got back then. Like, he was very much one of those people that thrived off all the controversy. Like, he lived for it, he loved it, he admitted that. And I think it was another member of the band said that once all these censorship groups started hating on him, that their sales actually went up because they got more attention.
Well, there's that famous scene in Congress where they read lyrics, and it's, looking at it in context or out of context, it's quite funny. It's quite funny. Oh, yeah, you know, it's weird. You look at it that, and you have this kind of very middle class American reading out these really offensive lyrics, and he can't quite get stuff to work. And you find yourself, I find myself laughing at it, but at the same time, I just find myself, I would not want to be in the company of this man. I really wouldn't. You know, he's been interviewed, he's drinking, he's clearly, by the time he's been interviewed here, and it clearly shows the progression, he is an alcoholic. I don't even know if he's a functioning alcoholic, because he's out. I mean, I don't think we see him very often in this documentary without a drink by his hand, but he's drinking, he's farting, he's just a nasty person. And I can kind of see, in a weird way, I mean, so the story behind this is that we have Ryan Sexton, who discovers him unconscious outside his house, starts to find out about him, and then becomes fascinated by him. And I can get that fascination. Can you? I mean, I'm saying this, like, I couldn't look away from the documentary. You know, I couldn't turn it off because it's like, what's he going to say next? Where is this going to go? I can find myself, because I asked this question to Tim, you know, in a weird way, someone like Ryan who's coming in, who's documenting, bringing his camera into their gigs, that in a weird way is also fueling the fire. It's a camera to perform to. It's giving him kind of, you know, it's fueling the ego. And you kind of go, because I know I asked him this, you know, because he was there in those early recordings, like, is the guy for real? It's like, is it an act? And that's what I really thought the documentary was going to say, that it's revealed, because he does talk about, you know, his work, his song, his music is art. I don't know where you want to come down on that. It is an interesting kind of idea. You know, we think of the freedom of speech is such a big part of American culture and American society. He has the freedom of speech. Whether or not you go as far as to say that's art, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, your thoughts, Victoria?
I was kind of the same as you. I spent the whole time wondering, like, is he serious? Like, does he actually believe what he's saying, or is he just saying it to get a reaction out of people? Like, I know people that do that. I have known people that do that. But because of, like, the nature of what he says, all this misogynistic pro-Hitler stuff, and I think the documentary balances it quite well. Like, it has clips of him saying all this and then saying, I don't actually believe it. And then he has his girlfriend of 6 weeks. Yeah, I hope she's doing better than she was then. His sister, and then a couple of other bandmates and, like, members of other bands. Nobody seems to really know if he was serious or not. And I still am not sure. And the whole lyrics is art thing. Like, his sister did say that where is it? His lyrics are inspired by what makes people cringe. Is that art? I don't know.
I certainly cringed when I watched this, because we were talking about, you know, trigger warnings for the documentary. It literally starts right from the jugular, where we see him performing on stage, and he has the executioner's mask on, which was part of his shtick. And I think his first song is like kind of, I think the lyrics are along like grab him, rape him, whatever it is. It's, you go, okay, right. I'm not going to like this guy, and I'm not going to enjoy spending time with this guy and being in his company. In a weird way, I come back to that point. I think if I was an interviewer, I would probably find him fascinating in a way, but I would probably not want to spend as much time as Ryan Sexton did with him, you know. And they say it becomes a fascination. He just shot and shot and shot. I think it says at the start he was going to make a short on him, and he just kept shooting. He kept shooting until the end, where we really see. Well, it's sad. I mean, I've seen alcoholism at work close to home in the past. You know, you see once it has a grip of someone, there's no letting go unless they seek help. And like, there's a scene near the end where the El Duce is nothing more than a character of ridicule. He's at a house party.
God, that was hard to watch.
He's pretty wasted. He's saying it lightly, and I'm not going to say I'm whiter than white. I've probably had a fair share of moments in my life. I don't know about you, Victoria. I couldn't comment, but I don't think I've ever been that bad. And I don't know. I don't think I felt sorry for him. I don't think in any way, but
I felt like I should feel sorry for him. And there was parts of the documentary where, because they obviously balanced showing his really outrageous comments, and then they balanced it with his background and how his father abused him, and how him and his sister were terrified of him, and how his sister basically said that El Duce grew up to be everything his father hated. What he became was a reaction to his father's abuse. And at that point, I was like, are they doing this to make me feel sorry for him? And I found it really, really hard to sympathize, because I've known people who have been through really awful stuff, and they haven't behaved or said anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's hard, like.
It comes back to a big thing. Can you enjoy a documentary but like, well, either in a film as well, can you enjoy a film but not like a central character? That has been an issue. We've touched on this before with previous films. I really like this documentary. I think there's flaws in it. I think there's things I would like to have done more. Near the end, it starts to draw parallels with the legacy, not so much of the mentors, not so much of El Duce, but kind of what he stood for, and kind of, with the media, how it sensationalized someone, and how, as already alluded to, we think of President Trump and his rise to power.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish they'd started to do that sooner in the documentary, rather than leaving that to almost like the last 10 minutes. There's a couple of clips.
Yeah,
there's a couple of clips from South Park. You're always going to get me onto a winner with South Park, and I do love that episode in particular where they talk about trolling, and I think, is it Norway? Norway are trolling.
Yes.
is going to be trolling the nation. They kind of talk about that idea of what if one person could use that power to provoke a reaction from someone by saying such horrible, nasty things. You know exactly who they're talking about. Tim Kirk, the producer, made no bones about it. He knew exactly who they were talking about whenever they made this documentary. I just wish they'd drawn that into the narrative, or brought it into the mix sooner, rather than very much at the start an onslaught of this guy's offensive. They make it quite clear they were not the only offensive rock band at the time.
Oh, yeah, they're very fair with that.
The only one I kind of knew, I possibly think from Jerry Springer, from watching it, because my father was obsessed with Jerry Springer back in the day, was Gwar. I don't know, Victoria, have you any of their best hits?
Oh, God, no, I was familiar with them because I was familiar with shock rock and what that's all about. Like, if you're not, it's just rock that's meant to provoke a reaction on you. So they use violence, they use provocative imagery like blood, costumes, masks. Modern example would be Slipknot. They're obviously not as bad as likes of the Mentors, but that's kind of what they're going for. But they were very, very big in the 90s, and like they did love provoking a reaction out of people. Gwar, they were like in the same vein as the Mentors, but they kind of took a stand against El Duce once he started promoting all the pro-rape stuff, and I'm glad they actually said something. Yeah,
there's a great scene in the documentary where they're all on Jerry Springer and they're being interviewed, and there's like this little kid who loves Gwar, and he's like, yeah, I love these guys, what they stand for, but this guy, and he points at El Duce, he's a dick, or he's
that was brilliant.
And you're just like, yeah, because he is, there's a scene again,
such a dick.
There's a scene again on the Jerry Springer show where he meets a woman, and at first you kind of think, okay, this is kind of the token white middle-class America, we think of Reverend Lovejoy's wife in The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Won't somebody think of the
children?
And you think of that, but then it's revealed that she's someone who herself was raped when she was younger, and the reaction of any normal person would be, oh my God, that's nasty, that's horrible, my God. The reaction of this man is to say, I thought I knew you from somewhere, and you just
so gross.
And you
I could feel myself just going, ugh.
Yeah, because we think of, like, I don't know, like I'm trying to think in my head of, we think of someone like Ricky Gervais, right? I don't know whether you like Ricky Gervais or not. Personally, I really do. I really like Ricky Gervais. Okay, some of the stuff that he has kind of done in the past, I do think has went too far.
Yeah.
I do think it's went too far. But sometimes when you hear the sensationalism about it, you kind of go, oh, wow, okay, what's this? What's he done now? And you look into it, you watch it, and you go, okay, he isn't actually poking fun at the thing you're getting shocked at. It is a really delicate thing to do. I don't think he gets away with it all the time. I think there's times it's just kind of perfect. I'm thinking of, oh God, this is a bit where I'm going to be terribly offensive. I'm going to get them wrong. Is it Caitlyn Jenner? Caitlyn Jenner, or am I getting the wrong Jenner?
No, I think it's the right one.
It's like did amazing things for women and female representation, didn't do a lot for female drivers, and you're just like, boom,
Oh, God.
yes, yeah, okay, I get that. That's great. This, on the other hand, is just. Do you think though it's someone looking for the? This is because we don't know because he's passed away now, but. Do you think there's a sense? Do you think it's an act? From based that on just what you saw in the documentary, do you think it's someone looking for a reaction for people to get that reaction, to get the kind of publicity that comes with it, or do you think that it is someone who is just offensive?
Honestly, I don't know. This is kind of like a really stupid comparison, but there were times where he felt like. He reminded me of Uncle Andy from Give My Headpiece, just that ridiculously over-exaggerated stereotype.
Do you want to explain to Uncle Andy is for any of our
That is
listeners?
such a Northern Irish reference.
Any of our listeners outside of Northern Ireland who may not have had the pleasure, Victoria Brown, of watching the umpteen series of Give My Headpiece.
Okay, if you don't know who Uncle Andy is, he was a very stereotypical loyalist Protestant who was in Give My Headpiece that just took the absolute piss out of Northern Ireland and the Troubles on our ridiculous political climate. Mm-hmm. Uncle Andy, he's an Elvis lover. He talks like this. He's very offensive, but like he thrives on it. But I don't think the character means it because the nature of the show is satirical. I really don't know with El Duce. I spent the whole time wondering, and then I was kind of thinking, because the film opens with the old-timey like title cards from The Birth of a Nation, where I was like, that's so random. But I wrote down the title card starts with "We do not fear censorship," so that idea of censorship and free speech runs throughout the documentary. And I was curious, so I looked up on Amnesty International's definition of what free speech is.
You have done a lot of homework for this show, Victoria Brown.
It annoyed me so much because I was watching it being like, he's saying disgusting things, but surely he has a right to say them. Like, it's not my job or anyone else's job to police what he's saying. Mm-hmm. So they said, free speech is the right to seek, receive, and impart information and all kinds of ideas by any means, but freedom of speech can be restricted to prohibit hate speech, which I think is what he was doing. Like at the very, very start, when, like you said, it opens with him doing a performance. He's got the mask and all on. And he literally says, anyone that likes to rape women, say, "See hell." Mm-hmm. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And again, like you said, if I was an interviewer, I would find him fascinating. But if this was just some dickhead down in the pub, I would be like, what is this guy doing? But well, he's given... what's the word? Like, you know, when someone's like on camera and they're in power, they're justifying what other people actually, even if he doesn't mean what he's saying, he is justifying the beliefs of people that actually believe that. Do
you think he would? Because this is one thing I asked Tim, and I can't remember exactly what Tim said. It was a couple of days ago we did that interview. That idea of like, do you think he would be saying those things if there wasn't a camera present? Because you get a sense like that the concert that at the start that we talk about, he's aware there's a camera there. He knows there's a camera there because, you know, Ryan has been speaking to him. He's met him. He's brought, you know, as I say now, these are not recorded on smart. These are not recorded. These are not recorded on smartphones now. You know, these were, you know, back in the 90s, back in the day, Victoria, these were big, bulky things. You couldn't get away from the fact that they would be there. You would know they were there. Mm-hmm. And this is what the thing I asked Tim, you know, is the fact that they're there, is the fact that they're there filming it, no matter what they thought, whether it was going to be for a short or whether what it turned out to be. Okay, it sat in storage for nearly 20 years before it came out. But that is fueling that, I suppose, ego in a way to say, well, if I can get this on camera, this will provoke a reaction. This will get said. This will get us notoriety. You know, is it weird to say, is he doing these things not just much for the notoriety, but for the potential for record sales? I don't know, because watching it and watching the interviews, it reminds me, you talked about your weird comparison with Uncle Andy. I'm not going to go as niche as that. It reminded me in a weird way, and I'm not going to say in any sense there's similarities between the two. A couple of years ago at one of the Comic-Cons in Belfast, I remember interviewing a wrestler, right? And
Okay.
it was Hacksaw Jim Duggins. And he couldn't get away from the persona of Hacksaw Jim Duggins. And this
Okay.
idea that all throughout on camera, as soon as the camera was on, he had to be this really loud, really obnoxious kind of character in that sense. And as soon as the camera came off, he seemed normal. And you were like, I don't want to, I felt like an exorcist, right? It's like, I don't want to speak to this persona. I want to speak to you. And I get a sense, we see that as the documentary goes on with Ryan, like there's moments where he talks about his father, his relationship with his sister. You get a sense that Ryan Sexton is trying to do that exact same thing. I don't know, because we'll never know. I don't know if he succeeds. There's that sense he's clearly meeting this guy who's built up this persona of who he is, what he stands for, and what he's all about. And I think you get a sense, you see an interviewer trying to kind of break that down and get to the core. I don't think he succeeds. I don't know if you would disagree or not. I know he does open up at times, but I still don't think that justifies what he's saying.
No, I agree 100%. Because there's we learned about this theory in documentary cinema when we were doing the documentary cinema module at Queen's. Most documentaries are either fly on the wall approach, which is you pretend the cameras aren't there, or there's fancy word, cinema verite, which is the camera is there to provoke, the camera is there to bring out the truth in you. But like you said, is he doing it because there's a camera, or is the camera pulling the truth out of him? It's hard to know, and we'll, like you said, we'll never know.
No,
because he's not here anymore.
No, I don't know. I really don't know. It's a bizarre one, and it's coming back to that question I asked you, and I'm not sure if we really kind of tackled it. That sense of, I think we've both made it clear. We find this guy offensive. We didn't like him, but we both really, really liked the documentary.
Yeah.
And, is that an issue for you? The fact that we can really enjoy a documentary, but hate the source of the documentary, the kind of the way, the central character that's being interviewed, the central character that is causing the narrative thrust. Like, here's the thing. Turns around, say tomorrow, okay, it's a weird kind of word because we're living in COVID. You might not be seeing people. Say tomorrow, you're at work. You're kind of saving the nation as an essential worker, Victoria Brown.
Thank you.
And your colleague turns around to you and says, do you know what? You do that blog and stuff with Banterflix. Would you recommend a movie for me?
Okay.
And you would be like, oh, yeah, I've recommended every single Disney film that has ever existed. We've got through that. Did you hear us talking about Robin Hood? No? Well, you should listen to that podcast. It was out earlier the week. But would you recommend them say, why don't you watch El Duce?
I would recommend it, but only... I don't think people who aren't like really into music would be that interested. If you can get me, if there's people I went to school with who were very, very into the music, they loved the whole punk scene, the shock rock scene, I would recommend it to people like that. I think this might be more of a niche audience, but that might just be my personal opinion.
Do you think if you were interested in what we've kind of touched in, we've only dabbled in it, that idea of free speech and censorship? Because I think this is where I think the documentary kind of expands beyond just the music industry, because it's not really a documentary about the mentors, really.
That's what I was expecting. That's why when I initially went in, I was like, right, this is probably going to be similar to the Rolling Stones one that I watched, and it wasn't at all. There was a review somewhere that said it was a character study, and it is. It's not, like you said, it's not about the mentors at all, really. It's all about El Duce.
It is a character study, and it's that idea of what do you do with a character like him? You're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you give him media attention, that will only fuel the flames. If you censor him, if you ban him, if you push those people out to the kind of and say, well, push those people to the sidelines, that attracts people and say, well, oh, Jesus, if this guy's music's banned, if this guy's... I want to see what he's all about, because that's what we're like as human beings. When I think back of... This is a time that predates you, but you'll know what I mean when I talk about the video nasties.
Yeah.
When there was the list of films that were banned in the UK, that became a watch list for me. It's like, fuck, I want to watch this. I want to watch that. I remember watching The Exorcist and going, why was this banned? Why was this banned? You know, in that sense, but that's what I mean. That pushed you to that. That pushed you to that. And that film and this film, stuff like Driller, Killer, and all that kind of stuff. But you know, it's that sense of you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you give them media attention, you fuel the flames. If you ban them, you create curiosity about the mentors and their music. So it's that sense of, you know, kind of, where do you draw the line? What's your thoughts, Jen? I know this is going to be a big loaded question, right? So you feel free if you want to take a couple of minutes to think about, like, what's your general thoughts on the concept and ideas of the concept of censorship?
It's such a big thing. I feel like this comes up every time we talk. But I'm okay with that. I'm kind of fascinated by it. One of my lecturers in Queen's, she actually specialised in the BBFC, like 1970s video nasties, regulation, censorship. That's what her like expertise is. But like you say, you really are damned if you do and damned if you don't, because humans are naturally going to be like, oh, why was this banned? I must know everything about it. But if you give them that platform, then it justifies their belief, because they have a right to. Just because you have a right to say it doesn't mean what you're saying is right. But who am I to police what they're saying? Yeah. It's so hard. And there's a thing going around on Facebook. It's Karl Popper's intolerance paradox, and it's been misused by people on the right and left. Like both sides misuse it. But the graphic that's going around basically says that you can't tolerate intolerance. But how far do you go with that? It's such a contentious issue, and with something like this, because this guy is disgusting. I was really like cringing watching him. I mentioned it to Matthew, and I kind of, because he doesn't know any music at all, he didn't know what shock rock or anything was, and I kind of explained to him and gave him a bit of context.
Hang on, you can't bring a term like that. He doesn't know music at all, so
he doesn't.
What does Matthew listen to? I feel every time we kind of talk one-on-one, Victoria, we seem to talk more and more about Matthew.
Matthew listens to Nickelback, the White Stripe, that one White Stripe song, and grime, like white rap. I don't know what it is. It's not my scene at all. Our music tastes are very, very different.
Oh no.
But I was explaining to him like all the stuff that El Duce was saying, and I was like, "Well, what do you think?" And he was like, "Well, he has a right to say it, surely." And I was like, I know he does, but it's so disgusting.
When you asked him, did he turn around and say, "Guns don't kill people, rappers do"?
Oh God.
I don't know why. I'm sorry, Matthew, if you're listening. I only get my kind of interpretation of you through Victoria. We hear your movie taste, and now in
He's
this
lovely,
podcast,
I promise.
And now in your podcast, we hear that you listen to Nickelback, one White Stripe song, and grime. It's all right. It's all good. I don't know. As I say, they take the piss in this documentary of Bon Jovi. I like Bon Jovi in the 80s. What can I say?
Noticed that? I was like, how dare you?
You know, you can take the piss out of Bon Jovi now, but not back in the 80s when he was kind of hot.
No, that
was
a power move. Like
that was hot. That's Hot John.
That was something I noticed. El Duce was very like pro, like manly men. He was very against like Kiss, who would have used a lot of makeup and wigs and stuff. He was he kept calling them glam rock fags.
He didn't like Motley Crue either.
No, he did not. He made that very clear. And
Motley Crue are definitely a group of lads, you know, from what we hear of what Motley Crue and co got up to. They were not, and I hate to use the term, they were not kind of, I don't even want to use the term, but no, they were definitely, I even hate this term even more. Motley Crue were definitely a group of lads, right?
Yeah.
And I don't really know why he would pick them specifically. I don't know whether it's not the fact that they're successful.
It was such a weird band to like direct all that hate towards.
I did love that episode because it's not, I forget who he's on with. It's I forget who. It's not Jerry Springer. It's other guy. And just when he's slagging off Motley Crue, there's just this group of really obnoxious looking like like teenagers, just getting really annoyed and like really angry at him. And you're like going, I don't know if I'd like to spend time with you guys either. I don't know. I don't really know who wins there. It's like Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose. I would recommend this documentary if if I was being honest. I would say there's definitely things that say going into it, like you would have to warn people of certain triggers and things that it touches on and things that it kind of discusses. But I do think it's an interesting character study, and I think by allowing it to be about the character and the man, it allows it to be less about the music and more about the things we're talking about now, the censorship. And I think that's a kind of interesting way and an interesting to this documentary. I'm sure there have been documentaries made about the mentors. I'm pretty certain of it. There have been more straightforward, charting their kind of career. I don't know if they were. The documentary doesn't really make it clear. I don't think they were ever big.
They don't seem to be. Like, they seem to be like big amongst that specific like fan base, but I don't think they were like if I asked my dad, I don't think he'd know who they were.
Yeah, because they aren't my music. They aren't my musical taste. I'm not into grime. Sorry, Matthew. I'm not into grime either. I don't know. I like a bit of this and a little bit of that. Hey, I'll listen to everything from Radio 2 to Scala, maybe even a bit of Radio Ulster when Hughie D's on. That's a very other Northern Irish niche reference. I'll not even try to explain your Uncle Hugo. No. All I will say is Hughie D is your Uncle Hugo from Strabane, and that's all you need to know. And he was someone, do you know what? In all honesty, Victoria, there was someone, see, a few years ago, I said, oh, Hugo D, Hugo Duncan, to give him his full name, censor him, get rid of him, can't stand the man. See, in the last year or two, particularly this year of lockdown, I've been like, you know what? Let him do his thing. Let him do his thing. He's making people happy, even if he does that whole skibbity doobity doobity all that kind of stuff. I can't stand that. And he talks over records, which is what a DJ should never do. But anyway, that's going down the Hugo Duncan thing. Hugo Duncan is nothing like El Duce. I just want to make that clear. Hugo Duncan is actually a rather nice man who presents a radio show on Radio Ulster, and sometimes he talks a language that not even us Northern Irish people kind of understand. But we're getting off topic, which is what we do. But I don't know. I mean, as I say, I don't know really what else we need to say about the documentary. I think my main criticism, as I've already said, is I wish that the parallels and the kind of theories that they create by the end, or the kind of the things that they want to point you to, and the legacy of the mentors and what they all stood for. I wish they had done that sooner. Like, I'd rather they start in a weird way. I'd rather they started with that kind of weird, I think it's Saturday Night Live skit or something with Amy Poehler.
That was so bizarre.
You know, in a weird way, I think they kind of, they started, they probably did the best thing they could. This is an offensive person. Let's get that right over and done with. Yeah. Let's get that out there right now. But I just think the interest and stuff, just as I was kind of going like, right, okay, I'm actually getting into this now. I kind of want to know, do you think, because most of the talking heads are just mostly folks from that scene. I don't think, like, I mean, they don't interview Jerry Springer or anything like that. Anybody, they don't mention anybody. They don't interview, I think, anyone from the media side of things. They don't interview anyone from the political side of things. Do you think the documentary needed that?
I don't know. I think that would have made it too broad, and then it would have been hard to make a point of any kind. Like, you would have just been seeing clips after clips after clips. I do like the way, like you said, I would have preferred the parallel to come in a bit sooner. But I think, considering they had 40 odd hours of footage, I think the way they've structured it and condensed it was done really, really well. Yeah. Like, I thought it was very balanced, but I'd be kind of curious to see what the media thought of him, because obviously you only got what they aired on TV, and that's meant to be controversial to get you to watch it. But I'd love to know, like, their actual opinions of him, now that you say that, especially that other guy. I don't know his name. He was the more right-wing side. Because
I'd just love to see, like, Jerry Springer now, looking back in that sense of, there's no one really, from a media point of view, kind of saying this idea of what we've mentioned, this idea that the more you focus on someone like that, the more attention you bring to who they are and what they stand for. There's no one from that. I think there's a couple of, I think it's his sister makes that point. They go, he loved it, he lapped it up, you know. And I think there's another members of the band. I think you mentioned this earlier on. It really helped our record sales and that kind of stuff. We see all that, but I'm just kind of, it would be curious to see if there was an interview with someone, because they've clearly went and done some interviews, kind of posted, because it's not all this archive footage, but it would have been interesting to see someone from outside of that scene. I think the two interviews that really stuck out for me, other than the El Duce himself, is his girlfriend, who you've mentioned too.
Yeah, she was odd. See when she mentioned that they'd only been together 6 weeks, I was like, oh, okay.
Did you hope?
I didn't know what.
Did you hope, Victoria, that it was like they broke up after 6 weeks and 1 day?
I hope so, because I couldn't get like a read on her, because she was talking. They asked her like, does he treat you nice? Like, how did you meet? Blah blah blah. And I was like, love, you seem really nice. Why are you with this guy?
She seemed really naive.
I don't think she understood what he was actually like, because she mentioned, because they asked her if he got drunk around her, and she kind of said it's like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, and I was like, love, that should bother you. That should be a red flag. Like, that's not cute or endearing or charming. Like, he needs help. It's
not like listening to grime music. It's not endearing like that. But and then there's another female interview that they speak to. I don't know if she's in the band or she's just a dancer in the band, or they just work together because he started out in a strip club.
Yeah, but I think she was like a roadie or something.
I find her again kind of that weird I'm interesting, but at the same time kind of, really? This is kind of how you think? It's like, she's like, yeah, all that stuff's a load of nonsense, a lot of hokum, doesn't offend me in the slightest bit. It's like, really?
What does offend you?
Because it's like, coming back to the girlfriend, like there's the ones she's like, is any of their songs they offend, and there's one, is it On the Rag? I hate using that term. Yeah. She's like, yeah, and you're like, that's the one song that offends me, and you're like, really?
Out of everything that he says.
There's stuff about sodomizing women. There's stuff about raping women, and you're like,
there's a bit I visibly like cringed at, and I was close to turning it off, where he talked about peaceful rape, and I was like, no, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, he kind of talks about it, and it's in detail.
It's very much in detail.
And it is I would say that I was watching it where we record now. It was a screener that was sent us. I was watching it on my computer. And I know we talked about this, a few weeks ago with the Robin Hood episode, where we talked about the fact that something like this is in streaming. You have the power to turn it off there and then. Like I did get close. If I wasn't reviewing this, if I wasn't doing an interview for it, I think I might have turned it off.
Yeah, me too.
I don't even know if I'd got that far.
That was my issue with the bit at the end with the parallel. I think that felt very tacked on. I feel like a lot of people wouldn't get that far before they turned it off, so their whole point would have been gone. That dialogue for the wider themes of what they're actually exploring. Yeah. If you get me.
Yeah, we're talking the same thing. It's kind of my issue in that sense, that to draw the parallels with society now, and we think now of Twitter and what's going on. I keep mentioning it. Sounds like I'm bloody obsessed with Donald Trump, but all that things, like we think now of like the horrors of what it would be to have El Duce on social media. How many times Twitter would have to go behind a message, "This views expressed this tweet are offensive and may cause distress." You're like, yes, I would imagine that would just be his profile picture. Mm-hmm. But I think that is an issue, because if you're watching and you don't know what it's about, other than found footage, and it's an offensive character, particularly, I mean, that scene you're talking about in particular about the peaceful rape, that I think is a point where I think a lot of people say, well, where are you going with this documentary? Other than trying to shock me and trying to show me that offensive people exist. I know offensive people exist. There's been one in the White House for 4 fucking years. I know that. But it is my big criticism, and I know I'm repeating myself, is what they try to do with the documentary. It feels like they've tried to kind of bring together those 40 hours for this. And like, as you said, if they'd done that sooner, I think you would know kind of clearly what you're on board for.
Like the more I watched it, like you said, it was just constant repulsive comments, and it was just over and over and over again. I was kind of like, right, I know what he's like now. I've been watching for 40 minutes. Like, how much more are you going to show me? Like, what's your point?
Would you watch it again?
Not on my own. I might watch it with someone else to see their reaction, but I don't think I'd watch it. I'm glad I watched it. I do think it's very powerful. I think it's well made, even with our criticisms, but I don't think I'd watch it again on my own.
Yeah. I think I would struggle if it's not a case of if it was shown on Film 4 on BBC One, BBC 2, 10 o'clock, I wouldn't be saying, right, I'm going to sit up and watch that. It's not La La Land. It's not like going to go, right, I'm going to watch that. It's definitely not La La Land. But I think I would struggle to want to watch this again. In the same way, I think nobody in the world has ever said, I'm really in the mood to watch Schindler's List tonight. I don't think anyone has ever said that.
Christ.
And
God, no.
It's that sense of, it's something I've watched. I'm glad I've watched. I think it's well made. I think there's flaws. I think it's an interesting character study, but I don't think I'd want to kind of go back. I would just feel dirty. I feel dirty again just talking about it. I think on that note, we shall wrap up our review of the El Duce Tapes. It's available now on video-on-demand services, so you're free to check it out if you so wish. And with that, we shall move on to the last part of this podcast, Any Other Business. Okay, Victoria, very quickly, let's talk about something much more lighthearted. Let's move away from the nastiness of El Duce. Let's kind of very quickly talk about some of the stuff you've watched over the last week or so.
Haven't been watching much. Like, I've been in work a lot, and I'm really reluctant to commit to anything new at the minute because my mental health's very low, and I know I wouldn't enjoy it. I wouldn't pay attention. I am excited though. Like, I don't know, I'm not sure when this podcast is going to come out, but Disney have just announced a load of stuff. But they're doing a series focusing on Tiana from Princess and the Frog. They're doing Baymax. They're doing Zootopia. What else? Moana. The new Loki series as well. Very excited for that. I met Tom Hiddleston a couple of years ago when he was here filming High Rise. We went twice and he remembered me the second time. So every time I see him, I'm like, there's my baby. He remembered me.
Hang on, Victoria. So you stalked Tom Hiddleston when he was in Northern Ireland?
Yes, I did. To be fair, they filmed in this it was like my childhood swimming centre in Bangor.
It was in Bangor, yeah.
Yeah. And I worked at the cinema literally like a minute up the road. So I knew he was there. And he was really lovely. Like, my friend Brooke was obsessed with Marvel and she wasn't able to go, so I had her on the phone. And he came up to me and was like, who are you talking to? And I was like, oh, it's my friend. And he was like, do you want me to speak to her? And I was like, Brooke, you hold on a second. Someone wants to talk to you. It was the best thing ever. I
didn't get a proper chance to chat to him, but a few years ago, I think it might have been when they were filming High Rise, a film I absolutely love, by the way.
Brilliant.
He was here. Ben Wheatley was doing a thing at the QFT for the first episode of one of the series of Peter Capaldi's Doctor Who. And someone just leaked into the seat, 2 seats behind me, and I turned round and I was like, it's Tom Hiddleston. You're Tom Hiddleston.
Oh my God.
I'm sitting within kind of like 2 rows of Tom Hiddleston. But you know what? I thought it was lovely because no one really bothered him. Nobody kind of was like kind of squealing or screaming. Thankfully,
people here are very respectful. I find like that's a lot of the Game of Thrones stars would say that's why they liked being here because people don't be like, oh my God, it's so and so.
Apart from you, meeting Tom.
Apart from me, yeah. I was 18. Leave me alone. But I think a lot of the time, like most people would be reluctant to even go speak to someone famous here.
Yeah. Well. It depends on the fame.
From people I've known, like my Matthew's friend saw Peter Dinklage in Centra of all places and kind of just like watched him like do his shop because he was too embarrassed to go say hello.
I don't think I would bother Peter Dinklage at Centra, right? I would let him be. I'd maybe take a sneaky photo and be like, or maybe kind of hang around. This is going to be terrible. This is me being terrible now, and see if he needed anything from like the top shelf. I'd be like, hey Peter, do you need me to help you? And it'd be like, thanks. And then that would be the start of our friendship, and we'd be friends for life. It'd take me on to Game of Thrones,
of course,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't think I've ever. Okay, I've met a few famous people over the years. Usually it's been set up with interviews and stuff. I've never been this person that has needed to kind of go and get autographs. So I know people that are the complete opposite. I'm not saying you are in any means. The
only one I've ever done it with would have been Tom Hiddleston. I think I think people ruin it for themselves, and they get like, because like actors are tired. They've been on set all bloody day. They're shattered. Like the last thing they want to do is talk to people, and they're going out of their way to be nice and come talk to all these fans. And a lot of them are very rude and demanding, and I think that ruins it for a lot of people. And I never wanted to be like one of those fans.
Yeah, but even though the second time Tom's seen you, it's like, hi.
To be fair,
I think I remember you. Yeah.
I think you remember me because I asked him to sign something really obscure. Do you remember the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris?
Mm-hmm.
Where he plays Scott Fitzgerald? Because I was like, I was doing A-level English at the time. We were doing Gatsby, so I was obsessed, and I was like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity here. Because I got him to sign like my DVD copy of it. It's still in my room, so I think that's why he remembered me, because he was like, Midnight in Paris, really?
You
of all things.
you didn't quote kind of Gatsby as you were kind of.
I should have.
Gatsby believed in the green light. I used to know it all completely off by heart. When I get horribly drunk, and my Facebook and Twitter timeline will verify this, there is several times where I get very drunk. And sometimes when you get drunk, you're talking about mental health. When you get a little bit down, that's what alcohol does. It's antidepressant. Mm-hmm. I will find myself just going on to Facebook and just kind of quoting some of the last lines of The Great Gatsby, because I love... you know what? I like both versions of the film. I love the book, but I love both versions of the films. Both are good in different
Both have strengths in different areas, yeah.
So you haven't been watching much. You're excited about all the stuff that's coming to be. Mm-hmm. I do want to ask one question, because we have never actually talked about it since, I can't remember the last time we might have mentioned this. Now that it's on Disney Plus, have you ever got round to watching Frozen 2?
I knew you were going to ask me this eventually. No. I am the worst Disney fan ever. What did I rewatch recently?
So
I had Sleeping Beauty on in the background when I was doing my Christmas decorations, but like I've just been binging The Simpsons over and over again because I can't really concentrate on anything. Like there's been days where I'm sick and I've been like, right, I'll lie in the sofa, I'll lie in our little fort in the living room and I'll watch Frozen 2, and then I just don't.
That's okay.
By the end of the year, how many days have I got?
Not
like
a lot.
3 weeks.
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. I think when we finally hear the words that Victoria Brown has watched Frozen 2, I think we need to do a podcast special, even if it is on Christmas Day, and she's just like, Jim, I finally watched it. It's like, right, okay, forget, even if you're coming onto the studio, onto Zoom with half your Christmas dinner kind of still in front of you and eating it, I still want to hear your thoughts on Frozen 2. It's good. Well, it's out in Sky, I think, over Christmas. I don't think it's quite, I think even though you have Disney Plus, of course, other streaming services are available, Victoria Brown, I think the time we will be actually get round to hearing your thoughts on Frozen 2 is when it's on BBC at Christmas. Probably next year, when you're just at that stage when you're too full of food, you can't move, the dog's been walked, you can't use that as an excuse, and Frozen 2 is on, and you're like, all right then, I'll watch it. I genuinely thought maybe like, because it wasn't right away, it wasn't straight away on Disney Plus's service.
Yeah, it took a while.
It took, I think, it came out in DVD first, then they released it. I think that's the way it worked. But I thought, I haven't really asked. It's like, she's bound to.
Every time we've done a podcast, I'm like, he's going to ask me, and you haven't. So I was like, I'll just put it off until I actually watch it.
Yeah, so I decided, we've done 2 Disney recordings, especially about Disney and their back catalogue. I didn't bring it up. I decided the perfect time to bring it up would be the El Duce tapes.
Oh, of course, because they just align naturally.
Okay, so how about that? You haven't said you've been mostly watching The Simpsons. Have you been watching anything? Are you allowing yourself even kind of Christmas movies at this stage as we record? Have you found yourself even kind of tempted? The Muppets Christmas Carol? Because you've heard the words.
We save that for Christmas Eve every year.
Because the Muppets Christmas Carol, it's now, I don't know if it's going to be on Disney Plus, but it has been restored now. We now have the full version of the Muppets Christmas Carol with the song that's only on the album. And the name of the song has went out of my head when Scrooge is looking back at his past loves and how Christmas is past, which I wish I knew the name of the song off the top of my head, but I saw recently BBC have said it's been restored. It was only available on the VHS versions of A Muppets Christmas Carol, but it was never on the DVD or the Blu-ray because they didn't think they could get it in high res, but they found it and they've done
Ah.
it. The joys of lockdown when people have much more free time.
Free time.
So, I mean, we've started watching Christmas movies at our house. We've been watching crap ones, right? Because you get the crap ones over and done with, get them done early, and then you can move on to the good ones.
Did you watch the Christian Stewart one?
Yeah, I really liked it.
See, I've heard mixed. I've heard mixed opinions, but like I'd rather just make up my own mind.
I think it's perfectly serviceable. I think it's perfectly fine. There's worse Christmas movies than that. I really like Kristen Stewart as an actress. I really do. I don't judge her performances based on the Twilight movies the same way I don't judge Robert Pattinson on all his acting career based purely from the Twilight movies. I think she's done some great things in European cinema. The Clouds of Sils Maria, I would recommend to anybody. There's a few other ones. Personal Shopper, I think, is great as well. But I think it's perfectly serviceable, perfectly fine. There's things that I could talk about, but I don't want to spoiler. But I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. I still put it on the kind of, if next year, when it comes around to the Christmas movie advent calendar, it'll still be early in December. It'll not be anywhere near the likes of Elf, Scrooge, Muppets Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life, Die Hard. Those will all be watched around kind of, well, Die Hard is always watched around Christmas Eve in our house. We try.
I love that.
I want to get to the point where I want to time it just at 12 o'clock and Hans falls from Nakatomi Plaza. I want to be that much of a nerd, but I never have been able to. And I've talked about this in the past. This will be the first Christmas in a while I'll not be back with my parents because my wife normally goes on holiday and we'll be watching it. And my wife is very much of the persuasion, Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. She's not. We have arguments.
Ooh.
We have arguments all year round. And I'm very much of the persuasion that it is. It's a Christmas movie. It's a Christmas movie. And it's not just a Christmas movie for boys. It's a good, proper Christmas movie. And this will be the first year she has to go through the process of watching it on Christmas Eve. So I love watching it at home with my mum because every year she goes, oh, yeah, I know the script of this. I know exactly what's going to happen. And then about 10, 15 minutes into the film, she forgets. She loses herself and everything. And she'll just be like, oh, what's going to happen now? And she shouts at the TV and she does everything. That. And I think that's just a thing that happens to mums. I don't know. I don't know. I've heard some
My
weird
mum's
stories.
going that way.
Yeah, I've heard some weird stories about your mum over the years, Victoria. So, hello, Victoria's mum, if you're listening to this podcast. I don't know what you'll be listening over Christmas. All I know is that you walk through your house like Snow White. That's all I know.
Yes, she does.
Yeah. So I think kind of there's not really much else. If you haven't been watching, you haven't got around to watching Frozen 2, we're not going to pass any judgment. You know, Simpsons, what's been your favorite Simpsons so far on Disney Plus?
Well, I love the Treehouse of Horrors one, but I'm on the episode where they go to Flanders Beach House and Lisa tries to recreate herself as the cool girl. And she's like, yeah, you know, whatever. So good.
Do you know what I've realized? The new ones, they're not great, but they're not terrible.
Yeah, they're okay.
They're not, particularly the newer ones. I think they've just had Series 31.
Yeah.
It's not as funny as the original, as the early kind of Series 1. Some people say only 1 to 10. I maybe go as far as season 15, 16, I think, when it's still solid. Season 31 or 32, whatever we're at now, they're not terrible. I don't think if I was watching it now for the first time around, I would fall in love with The Simpsons the way I had when I watched it when I was younger. But it's not as bad as people have told me.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So I don't really know. I don't think there's much more to say other than that, you know, watch a lot of Simpsons and maybe Victoria at some point. I think we'll start a Twitter campaign and we'll say we need to get Victoria Brown to watch Frozen 2 before 2020 ends. It might, you know what?
Doesn't give me a lot of time.
You know what, Victoria? It might be the film that might just gives you that little lift because I don't know. This is not me. Generally, this is not me prying, and it's that sense of I'm a firm believer that cinema can lift you when you need. It's the warm hug sometimes you need. If I was a doctor right now, maybe it's a bit too soon. I would say, here's a prescription of It's a Wonderful Life. Here's a free rental of that. Watch that. It works for me. I've never done it at home. I usually go to the cinema once a year around Christmas and say, right, okay, this is the little pick me up that I need. That my belief in humanity will be reaffirmed by George Bailey, and George Bailey will be saved. Every year, George Bailey has to be saved. Otherwise, you know, it could be Christmas with the Cranks. That's not going to do any good for anybody. But no, yeah, that's what I say. It's not me being flippant. It's not me trying to pry. I don't know if you feel that way. Like if cinema can lift you.
No, cinema does 100% do that for me.
Just not El Duce
That's the main reason
Tapes.
I love it.
Just not be able. No, that was probably the wrong film to watch. What you should have done is like to be like El Duce Tapes. Just be like just ready Frozen 2.
Yeah, that's what I should have done.
Just let it go, Victoria, and just go out there into the unknown. And I can't think of any other songs from Frozen.
You tried.
I can't even think of any songs from Frozen 2, although I do have the soundtrack because my lovely wife sings it to me when she goes for car journeys.
Oh.
That's love. But anyway, that's enough of my personal life and your personal life. We shall bring this podcast to a close. We will let Matthew get back to listen to some grimy music on those headphones. And we shall have you back on a future pod. And maybe, just maybe by then, we'll be able to talk about Frozen 2. But thank you very much, Victoria Bragg.
Thank you, Jim.
So that pretty much brings this week's podcast to a close. Thanks to both Tim and Victoria for giving up their time to chat about the El Duce Tapes. If you've enjoyed this week's pod, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasting fix. If you've been listening to us for a while, maybe you'd be so kind as to leave us a nice review because that helps us attract new listeners to the pod. And maybe you've been listening now for so long you might want to support us through our Patreon page. There's a couple of different tiers. Each have their own various levels of goodies that are available to you as a thanks. You can find more information about our Patreon page at our website at www.banderflix.com. And there you'll also find not only the back catalogue of this podcast, but also our TV show on NVTV and a glut of written reviews and articles that are all available for you to peruse at your leisure. That's enough of me selling our wares. I've been your host, Jim McLean, and we'll be back pretty soon with another episode of We Need to Talk About Movies.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.